about by the German ambassador. As you all probably know, today, hundreds of thousands of people all around Europe welcomed the refugees coming to Europe. It was a kind of a day of solidarity in Europe, not just in the European Union, but in Europe as a whole. People in London, in Berlin, in Vienna, in Skopje, in Nice, everywhere, all around Europe, went out on the streets to say welcome and that we are your friends and you're safe here. So actually this is one of the things that we'll be talking about during this session. We will be talking about maybe the biggest crisis in the world, and especially in Europe, for quite a while. And with me here today I have Professor Dimitris Christopoulos, Associate Professor at Pantheon University in Greece and Vice President of the International Federation of Human Rights. And we will be touching the topic that was already touched today, and the topic is about the crisis within the crisis. There's the solution. The crisis within the crisis with the migration as a European rights issue. And we will try to get several theses, and Professor Christopoulos will be talking about several theses. What does it mean to have a crisis within a crisis, and in what sense what is happening now with the migrants and with the refugees is a human rights issue. So, because... Yeah, now it works. Because we had a half an hour longer session with the ambassador, we will continue to work half an hour more during this session, so it will be an hour and a half. Professor Christopoulos will have his presentation, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions or to discuss the topics or the thesis that he will be discussing at the moment. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I thank you very, very much for the invitation. I love this town. So, interrupt me when you wish. So don't wait for me to finish. Just raise your hands and I can give you the floor so we make it easier for everybody. So, European migration management, human rights challenges. Yes, indeed, the crisis within the crisis, because being a Greek, that is how I conceptualize what's happening with the refugees today. I mean, we have everything, and then we have the refugee issue. Imagine how it is. So that is what it meant by a crisis within the crisis. So I'm working a lot on migration as an activist, being the Vice President of the International Federation of Human Rights, but I'm still a professor. So I will try to think along with you some issues around migration, trying to conceptualize some basic facts about migration and problematize what is happening with migration today in Europe. So let me start with my first slide here. Why? Doing what I've been told.
It doesn't work.
It was working before.
Yeah,
now it
is.
done.
Now it is.
Okay. Can we put it in a slide projection? Yeah. Okay, I'm doing now. Okay, who are these people from? Where are these people from? America, Brazil, and Cuba. I think you're wrong. So the first guy, he's Irish. His grandparents came from Ireland at the end of the 19th century, along with the great migration flow from Ireland to the United States. The second lady, the lady in the second, no, I thought it was Castro. She comes from a town which is not very, very far from here. She comes from a town in central Bulgaria named Gabrovo, not a very big town. And the third guy, his parents came from a very poor village of Galicia, which is the poorest region of Spain. So Spain, Ireland, and Bulgaria. Three international leaders. They migrated from their hometowns to the other side of the earth. And now the lady she's governing, the most dynamic economy of South America. The guy with a cigar, he's the most well-known revolutionary leader of the 20th century after Lenin. And the guy at the left, he was assassinated because he was considered to be the most revolutionary American president and so on. Why I say that? Because Europeans were always migrating. This is what they know very well to do. Europeans were the first to teach migration. They did it. They have it in their blood. They consider that it is something like their innate right to migrate. They can do it. And whenever they had the power, whenever they had the money, whenever they had the guts, they were doing that. And they were migrating everywhere, as they still do, but they are a little bit in a puzzlement when people migrate to Europe. So Europeans, they face a kind of a paradox. They feel that they have the right to migrate everywhere on earth, but they do not like when people migrate in Europe, which is not very fair. Okay, you cannot go to Brazil, govern Brasilia, you cannot go to Cuba, govern Cuba to the States, be the president of the United States, and here you will not allow some people to come. I'm not thinking of having in the next generation a Syrian president of the Greek Republic, Lebanese president of Macedonia, Libyan president of Germany. These things you cannot think about, but there we think about them. So this is what I'm saying, this is what I'm challenging European perceptions of migration. We will never consider to have migrants as heads of our states, but we are very familiar with the fact that our people are governing the places they migrated to. So, we tend to conceptualize migration as a problem. Spontaneously, we react by saying that migration is a problem. So, I'm trying to think here now, what is a problem? A problem is a perceived gap between the existing state and a desired state, a deviation from a norm, a deviation from a standard, or a status quo. This is what we call a problem. This is a problem, a deviation, an issue. A gap between the existing state and the desired state. Think about migration being a problem. What is a phenomenon? A fact or a situation that is observed to exist or happen, especially one whose cause or explanation is in question. Is migration a problem or a phenomenon? No, migration is not a problem because there is no solution to migration. A lot of left liberal activists will tell you that migration is not a problem, migrants have problems. No, that is an easy thing to say. I'm saying that migration is not a problem because there is no solution to migration. It is a phenomenon, please. That is an extremely good point. I'm using that point afterwards. Actually, I'm trying to deal with that. The fact that people conceive a phenomenon as a problem does not make it a problem. The fact that the majority of the public opinion regards something as a problem does not make it a problem. Of course, the way you have to deal with this issue politically, you need to be extremely sensible with the fact that people regard it as a problem. But if we see what is a problem and what is a phenomenon, if you see in these definitions, which are extremely objective, impartial definitions, I think that you will easily put migration in the second. Migration is not a perceived gap between an existing state and a desired state. It's not a deviation from any status quo. It's not something like a violation. It can violate borders, it can violate norms, but it's not a deviation. Why? Because migration has been and had been always happening. So let me go again to something which an extremely influential philosopher of science, Gaston Bachelard, said at the beginning of the 20th century. An insolvable problem is a problem wrongly put. So migration is not a problem because it has no solution. So when we speak today about migration, try to forget the very optimist and very naive, in my perception, approaches according to which we will find solutions to the problem of migration. So if you hear that, be extremely cautious, because we will not find any solutions, because migration is not a problem, it is a phenomenon. And we have to live with this phenomenon because it is there, whether we like it, whether not. Whether we feel solidarity with migrants, whether we do not feel solidarity with the migrants. Whether we are with the migrants and we feel brothers because we are a part of their destiny, whether we are a part of a racist group in our countries and we hate the very idea that migrants come to our places. So, let me then start with some other ideas which are usually usually perceived ideas about migration, very, very well spread around the public opinion. So, migration as a synonym of poverty. We tend to identify migration with poverty, which is correct, of course. Poor people, they leave their countries and they migrate. Is it? Tell me. No, but yes, tell me.
Because I have a lot of colleagues who are not poor people, but they don't want to live in my country.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. From the study of the European migration experience of the 19th and the 20th century, no state has accomplished its transition to developed capitalism without having exported and imported a considerable number of migrants. So you very well put it, migration tend to be identified with poverty by the public opinion, poor people coming, but it's not always like that. Actually, a lot of people who are not poor migrate. If we see who migrates from Pakistan, from Iran, from Afghanistan, and from Syria, actually is not the poorest. There are always the poorest who are not able even to migrate, because migration means money and other things. But on the other hand, migration helps the country of origin to become a little bit richer because people send back some of their money, and of course helps the country of destination to develop, because that is the way the system helps and works. So, for example, Greece is not the same in 2010 as it was in 1990. Why? Because in the meanwhile we had 1 million migrants in the country who worked for the development of the Greek economy and so on. So, how do migrants move? The picture of miserable migrants that penetrate irregularly the developed countries is impressive, but it's partially correct. Of course, people come in an abnormal way, in the way we see today between the Greek and the Macedonian borders and so on. But actually, if we tend to conceptualize the migration experience in the long term, what we're going to see, that migrants have been always creating networks that feed the migration flows and then reproduce them. This is what we call the migration circle. That is how migration goes. So Albanians at the beginning were coming in an irregular way to Greece, penetrating the territory without knowing where they were going, but this created a kind of a network, a kind of line. And then their relatives, their friends, used their people who have migrated before them, and that is how the system works. And then the network, and then this line, feeds back migration. This is how it goes. So Greeks migrated to the United States at the beginning of the 20th century. The first Greek migration at the beginning of the 20th century, or even at the end of the 19th century, was the basis upon which the second Greek migration flow to the US in the 40s worked. And now, within the Greek crisis, Greeks of my age or younger Greeks today use the previous migration flows. When I say previous, I mean 110 years ago or 60 years ago, to use relatives, to find people, to identify people who know each other in order to move to the States. So actually I was in an island this year who is very well known for a huge Greek-American community in Florida, and the people from the island do not dare to go anywhere else. They will not tell you, I'm going to Europe, I'm not going to Germany, I'm not going to the European North, but directly they will take the plane to see their relatives to Florida. So this is a migration circle. So, are migrants really uninvited? So that is another point. We tend to see, and we correctly do, migrants as uninvited individuals in our countries. We have a few exceptions, of course. We have exceptions of countries that really invited migrants. This is the case of Belgium, of the Netherlands, and particularly the case of Germany after the end of the Second World War, where we had bilateral conventions between these countries and countries of the European South and the African North, where you had a conventional invitation for migrants to move. So this is the case with bilateral agreements of Germany with Algeria, Morocco, Yugoslavia, Greece, Portugal, and so on, and Italy. That is the case with Belgium and so on. So, but generally, the norm of migration is that people move without invitation. It's not like a party, I welcome you to my party, please join us. But it's like, I need to move and I'm moving without asking. So, are migrants really uninvited? Paradoxically, all developed countries welcome uninvited migrants. So, I do not invite you, but when I see you outside my door, I welcome you. Why? Because I am a philanthropist? No. Why I welcome you? Because I will be richer with you, and I will develop with you. And thanks to you, my economy will become stronger. So, illegal migrants, and now I'm talking about a pattern of migration particularly valid within Europe and particularly valid within the European South, irregular migrants, illegal migrants, are invisible for the legal order. They are illegal, but they are fully visible for the labor market. And actually, because they are fully visible for the labor market, that is why they are invisible for the legal order. Why? Because being irregular helps a lot. Why it helps to be irregular? Because I offer cheap labor, because I have a black market, because I have a range of comparative advantages that the local labor cannot fulfill. So that is why I welcome the uninvited. Another point. Migrants come to stay. We tend to think, generally, that when people move, they will leave. And that is generally the vision of the migrant himself. If you ask, I'm not talking about refugee flows now, I'm talking about classic migrant flows. If you ask most of the people that migrate, they believe that sooner or later they will return because obviously they wish to do so. People do not leave their country because they're like release. It's not like people do not leave their country because they're fans of adventures. That's a different thing. Ulysses, the Greek hero of Homer, he was a fan of adventure. He was an extremely smart guy moving around the world and so on. But the migrants are not like Ulysses. The migrants are not moving around the globe in order to get adventure. No. The migrants, they move from a certain place to the other in order to live better. So, in practice, however, despite of the fact that most of migrants believe that they will return sooner or later, in practice they do not manage to return. So, a big number of them stay in their country of destination because they do not have means to leave, because they root there, and others move again to new destinations, because for a migrant it's easier to migrate again than for someone that has never migrated. Once you are in the circle of migration, then it's easier for you to pack your things and leave again. Whereas if you're stuck in all your life in Krusevo, you find it hard to move. But if you live from Krusevo, then you go to Skopje, and then from Skopje you go to Berlin, then it's easier for you to take the plane and go to Atlanta. Whereas if you stay all your life here, if you're rooted here, then you hardly move. So, a very small number returns. So, among the three, the last category, the people who return to their country of origin, is the smaller. So, let's move to the other one. A big issue with migration, a big discussion about migration, is related to the use, sometimes the abuse, of terms such as exclusion and inclusion. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the term social inclusion, social integration, and so on. Let's clarify a few things. Social integration is the passepartout, is the key of the European Union vocabulary when it comes to migration. I mean, if you Google social integration and migration, you will get billions of references. Okay, you cannot speak about migration without the term social integration. Still, social integration is not only related to migrants. Why? Ella, tell me.
Hello, my name is Ilie, I'm from Romania, and I want to ask you something. What if these, let's say, refugees or immigrants, however we want to call them, don't want to be integrated?
Nice. Let me first, before I try to provide an answer to your question, think about integration as being a concept not only related to migrants. Because what I see in my country over the last 4 years, I see every day thousands of Greeks being excluded, people that have nothing to do with any migrant origin. Exclusion and inclusion, exclusion and integration are concepts which are not related to migration. They are related to the fundamental class structure of our societies. So, if you are able to participate in the societal affairs of your community, if you're able to develop your economy and live in a decent way, then you have your chances to be integrated in the community. Of course, locals, by definition, are in a more, compared to migrants, in a more advantage position when it comes to integration. But still, sometimes even the comparative advantage of being local when it comes to integration is challenged. Let me tell you something which I think will strike you. Over the last 5 years in Greece, we had a development of poverty of 80%, 26% of the GDP was lost. We have youth unemployment, people at your age, of 62%, and unemployment rising from 11% to 27%. Who is more affected by these figures? Both Greeks and migrants. Who feels threatened more by these figures? Who suffers more from that? Greeks. Because Greeks, they were better, let's say, they felt more secure than the others. So when you say to a Greek medium, let's say, yes, petite bourgeois family of Athens that now you have to live with 600 euros per month, they will suffer more than if you say the same number to an Albanian migrant family who came 7 years ago. Because the Albanians, they very well know what is poverty, whereas this Greek family forgot what is poverty back 2 generations. So, even this fact, this comparative advantage of the local when it comes to exclusion and inclusion is not that obvious sometimes. So, second point, when we speak about integration and social inclusion, we tend to identify the issue with the second generation, the kids who are born and brought up in the country of destination. I remember myself some 7 or 8 years ago in a seminar, no, 10 years ago, in a seminar in the United States with a very well-known American political geographer speaking about migration, and then I was sitting next to a Spanish guy, and we questioned the fact that actually he never mentioned anything about the second generation, because generally for Europeans, the second generation is the great integration issue. This is where actually the whole discussion about integration is played. And then I raised my hand and I put the question, and what is happening with the second generation of migrants? And he said to me, I quote, "You Europeans are not able even to see that the second generation is not a migrant. Second generation problems, the problems that have to do with the fact that somebody is of a migrant origin and he's born in the country of destination, are not problems mainly related to the origin of the father or the mother, are problems related to the age and the position in society of the subject. So, the problems of the second generation in the suburbs of Paris are not migrant problems, are social problems who have to do with the deadlocks of the French society. The problems of the second generation Albanians back in my hometown are not problems who are related with migration, are problems who are related with the social cohesion of the Greek political community. So, the so-called second generation is not really a migrant population, and the problems faced by the second generation are not problems mainly related to the origin of the parents. So, I will not tackle the last one because that is dangerous and will take time. I will try to answer to your question. So what happens when, let me answer the question and then you come up. What happens when people do not want to migrate, to integrate? People generally want to integrate as long as the economic structures of their lives are concerned. So everybody wants to be a part of an economy. So the rule is that everybody, regardless of any cultural characteristics, religions, affiliations, and so on, wants to be integrated in an economy, because if you're not integrated in an economy, then you die of hunger. So it's one-way ticket, integration when it comes to economy. When we speak about integration in the way you put it, we do not speak about integration in the economy, but we speak about integration in the political community, in the dominant culture, and so on. So what happens when people do not want to integrate on that? Then you have the following techniques. You have the tools to assimilate the population. If the people do not want to do it themselves, then you as the state, as the monopoly of the legal force, you will oblige them to integrate. If they still do not want to integrate, then you have a problem. And what happens then? Countries, they do things such as population engineering, trying to play with populations because some populations are not very welcome, and or they might reach to the other side of the spectrum, which is to recognize the fact that they are not able to integrate and try to find some common minimal rules which will allow the coexistence of both communities in the society. So this is what happens. I'm not speaking normative, I'm not speaking as a lawyer now, I'm not speaking in the normative level. I'm not telling you what should happen, I'm telling you what happens. So people, when they feel and when they do not want to be a part of the dominant culture, this is what is happening. Either you force them to assimilate, either you leave them apart, and then they develop their own identity, and then it makes your life more difficult. This is the case here. Either you start to play with populations. When was the first population exchange in our region? Long time. No, how long time ago? Yes, but that is not a long time ago. That's not prehistory. That's 90 years. My grandparents were there. Yes. Yes, but I'm not talking about the prehistoric population exchange. No. I'm talking about modern population exchange. So that is 1923. compulsory exchange of population between Greeks and Turks. After the end of the Ottoman Empire, after the end of the Greek-Turkish War, the League of Nations in Geneva followed a very perverted, if you want me to call it, plan of Nansen, a Norwegian, very intelligent guy. And he said, listen, the Greeks and the Turks cannot get along. We need to find a way to make smooth, to make it peaceful for them. How? We will move the Turks from Greece and the Greeks from Turkey. So 1 million Greeks from Turkey came to Greece, and 1,900,000 Ottoman Muslims left Greece and went to Turkey. So that is the recognition, the very formal recognition of the idea that I cannot integrate you. And because I cannot integrate you, I'm not able even to forcibly assimilate you, because, you know, assimilation is a very hard word, but it shows that at the end, I feel like that you can become a part of my community. This is what happened in Greece with the Macedonians. Forced assimilation, why? Because at the end, the idea was that you can become a Greek. Whereas this was not the case with the Turks, due to religion. Now I'm talking about a local issue. I forcibly assimilate you, you will forget what you are, because I feel like that you can become one of mine. If you forget who you are, then it's perfect. So that is forced assimilation. But still here we have the idea that you can become a part of me. When you exchange population, actually you recognize that nobody can become a part of nobody. Tell me. Yes, forced assimilation is the case of the Macedonians in Greece. One of a lot of cases. There are many cases. So, are migrants the poorest? We mentioned that. Migrants are not the poorest because migration costs, and the poorest part of the population is in principle excluded even from migrating. So when you see these poor, dirty Afghan people coming, reaching your country, be aware of the fact that these are not the poorest. Still, the poorest are waiting to come, and think of that. Okay. So, another fundamental idea upon which the way we problematize migration has been constructed, that we are the center of the world. From everywhere, migrants migrate to our place. If you ask every society in Europe and every society of developed, let's say, capitalism, they will tell you that we have the most of the migrants of the world. If you ask a Greek, he will tell you, we are fed up with migrants. If you ask a German, he will tell you the same thing. A British, a French guy, everybody believes that the majority of migrants live in their place. Very soon, I think you will have the same phenomenon here in Macedonia. Still, the phenomena are misleading. Only 12 to 15% of international migration flows are coming to Europe. We are a tiny, considerable, tiny minority part in the world population, in the world migration flows, which challenges the very idea that we are the center, that everybody is coming to our place. I mean, if you ask somebody who does not know migration studies and you ask him to draw how people move, he will put Europe in the middle and he will make arrows to Europe. This is not the case. Only 12 to 15% of people migrate to Europe. Which brings me to my final point regarding the first part of the lecture. Migration both as a norm and as exception, which means migration is a norm because people have been always migrating, so it's nothing new when people migrate. We might face it as something new in our lives, but it's nothing new in that. And second, this very idea that people move challenges autochthony as a fact that we are here, we are the locals, where the others are the migrants. And particularly if you want to speak about this part of the world, the idea of who is a local is a very relative idea. Everybody came from somewhere. Okay, if you're in Greenland, if you're in Iceland, yes, in Iceland you have locals. There have been genetic experiments showing that these guys, the Icelanders, they are from Iceland. But okay, you can look where is Iceland and where is Macedonia, Albania, Greece, Italy, etc., etc. So, people have been always migrating. Migration is the norm, but of course, it is an exception because people do not like to migrate. People, they're not masochists, to take their sacks and leave their countries. Only 3 to 4% of international population lives outside their countries of origin, which means that migration is together a norm, because people have been always migrating and they will still be migrating, but it is an exception, because people prefer to stay home. People are not crazy. If they can, they will do their best in order to stay home. If they see that it's hopeless to stay home, then they will go. Now, second part of the lecture. What is, I think, very crucial in order to understand why we have an issue with migration. We have an issue with migration because we are not neutral communities. We're not communities based on the fact that you all wear your lovely blue International Youth Alliance t-shirts. But we are parts of a community which is based on a fundamental belief that we are part of another community, which is nation. Tell me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're saying we have an issue with migration, and I'm wondering about your former definition of problem. If you use now the word problem in another sense, like what is an issue? Like it sounds like you mean problem, so that it would mean we have a problem.
When I said we have an issue with migration, I don't remember when I said it, but since you say so, I did. I'm not talking about how I see it. How do people perceive migration? The first part of what I've been saying, I was trying to challenge some beliefs about migration. So when we say we have an issue with migration, it means that from times to times, migration flow become more acute, more intense, and that is how, for the first time, for example, over the last 25 years, this particular country, understood that there is an issue with refugees in the world. Before, Macedonia only knew the refugees coming from Kosovo in 1999. So what I want to say is that, and I want to repeat that because that was a question which was already put to me. The way people perceive things is one thing, which has to do with ideology. The way things are is another thing, which has to do with phenomena. And what is our ideology? How do we stand? How do we construct our ideology? Do we construct it because we are all blonde, because we are all dark hair, because we wear our lovely blue t-shirts? No, we construct our ideology based on the fact that we are members of a national community, on the fact that we are members of a nation. And what is in a nation? What do we see in the nation? We see the fact that we are all sharing a common origin or a common will to be members of the community. So the nation, as the political community, actually hides and reproduces the very idea that solidarity is based on the common belonging. So Macedonians will feel solidarity to a Macedonian, Greeks will feel solidarity to a Greek, and so on. This is what it means to be a member of a nation. I'm not talking about nationalism and all these dirty things. I'm talking about the hardcore of being a part of a nation. I share solidarity with somebody who is a part of my political community. Why? Because I believe that we have the same history, or we have the same belief about our future. These are the two schools, the so-called German and the French school. The political nation, which is based on the fact that we construct the common will based on our consciousness of belonging and willing to build a community for the future. So I forget where you come from. What I want from you is to be with me in peace, so regardless of your origin, we will live together. Or this organic, romantic perception of the nation, which is based on the common cultural heritage of language, religion, music, poetry, and so on. There is no nation that has only one of the two. All nations have a portion of both political and organic cultural. I saw a hand somewhere there. Tell me, please.
I have a question in relation to the nation because of the idea of pan-European nation and the creation of European identity. How do you see the refugee crisis and the idea of creating the European identity? What relation could both have, and how the refugees that are coming right now to Europe could be integrated in the same, in the sense of creating a European identity for everybody?
I'm not very good with European identity. I'm not very good, not because I do not like the fact that we have a part of being members of this identity, but because I feel that European identity has been abused by the techniques and the vocabulary of the European Union. But so I would like to, I'm a little bit cautious with European identity, although after having followed the last half hour of the German ambassador, I very much appreciate the work done by Germany with the German initiative vis-a-vis the refugee issue. I don't know to what extent the refugee flow coming from the Middle East and Africa is able to revitalize the European identity. It might be an option. You know, history offers a range of options, and that is the good case scenario. Another scenario will be that everybody will return back home and he will look to his people and they will follow the Hungarian, let's say, example. By the way, Hungary was not the first to build the fences. Now Hungary is willing to build a fence all along this 135 kilometers border with Serbia, and everybody regards that as a perverted ultra-right idea. But the first fence has been constructed by the United States of America along its borders with Mexico, and we have seen this fence in many films, I guess. And actually my own country 3 years ago constructed a fence 12 kilometers long at the borders, at the terrestrial borders with Turkey over Evros River, which is the main reason why the migrant and refugee flows are not going from the European part of Turkey, moving to north part of Greece and then to Bulgaria, but they go through the islands. The fence is the reason. That is something that should, tell me.
But also Bulgaria just finished the fence.
Yes, because everybody is getting a lesson, which they believe it's a good lesson, because Bulgarians, they believe that the Greeks were very smart to do the lesson. But now the people in the Greek islands, they suffer because the others, they built the fence. Migrants suffer, refugees suffer. The Greek guys are suffering because the Greek state has this fantastic idea of the fence. And of course, Bulgarians will suffer along, I'm sure. Why? Because you cannot stop migration with a fence. If you read a little bit about migration, you know that you cannot stop the migration with a fence. You cannot horrify the people with the fence. The one thing you will do is you will shape, you will reshape, you will redirect the main, the routes of migrants. This is what you're going to do, which is normal, of course. Exactly. From Bulgaria to Macedonia and so on. I saw a hand somewhere. Πες μου.
Hi, I just want to add that there are also the fences between North Africa and Spanish enclaves, but it's just another example.
Yes, that's another
I don't want
example.
to fight about history and about the
Exactly.
exact date.
Yes, you're right, of course. So, why I'm saying that we have the nation? I don't want to give a lecture about the nation. I just want to speak about the nation because the way we have been conceptualizing migration is based on the fact that we are members of a national community. And we feel threatened. And we regard migration as a problem and so on. And we believe that the others, they are going to invade and intrude our societies. We believe that because we have a national belief. If we lived, let's make an hypothesis. We are living in an unnational world. We live in an ultra-liberal, unnational capitalism. Whereas there is no nation, we have the market which functions in a way that there is no borders, no nations, nothing. This idea will be extremely, this system of an unnational capitalism, this is anti-historical, there is no unnational capitalism, but let's pretend we have unnational capitalism. In that case, the only criterion upon which migration flows will have been working is the market. Classic liberal example, California, 1860s. You go there, you find your job, and you do it. No borders, nothing. But we have the nations, and this is what makes Europe more heavy to get it. So, that is what I'm actually saying, the paradox, migrants between economies and nations. Migrants are welcome to capitalist economies. They provide cheap labor, occasion for social security funds, demographic issues. You know, Europe is getting older, and everybody recognizes the fact that we need migrants in order to give some young, to provide some life to our societies which are getting older and so on. But migrants are not welcome to the nations because they do not belong to the nations, and they are conceived as a threat to the community since they violate its constitutive myths. And that is why we do not feel very safe with migrants being Greeks, Macedonians, Albanians, and so on. Now, I'm coming to the last part of my lecture, trying to deal a little bit with what's happening today, clarify who is the migrant and who is the asylum seeker. I don't know whether you're all familiar with that. I will read migrants, actually everybody who moves from space for whatever reason. The asylum seeker is someone who has made a claim that he's a refugee, meaning that he has a reasonable fear about his life. When I say reasonable, you understand. I cannot claim whatever I want. It must be kind of a reasonable thing. So, I think that what is happening today is challenging the difference between migrants and refugees. I think that today in Europe we are living in a change of paradigm when it comes to the traditional distinction of international law between migrants and refugees. The guy who is leaving Bangladesh because he's lost his house due to floods, he has nothing, he lost everything. He can be in the same position with someone who claims to be a refugee. I remember myself 4 years ago at the Greek-Turkish borders interviewing a young guy from Afghanistan. I said to him, "Why you come here?" And he said to me, "I have nothing in Afghanistan." And your family? I said, "The Taliban, they killed my family." "So why you come here?" "Because I have nothing. I have nothing." So the point was not the fear that they will kill me. The point was that I have nothing. So actually, I think this is what I'm talking about, challenging the formal normative distinction between migrants and refugees. I think very soon we will come to a situation where we will have very hard arguments in order to make a distinction. And actually, I was following a speech given by the German Minister of Interior a week ago, no, 10 days ago, in favor of refugees, in favor, welcoming refugees and so on. Actually, the main arguments he used after having finishing his humanitarian, let's say, discourse was that but these people will come here, they will work with us, they will make us stronger societies. It is the same arguments that a utilitarian approach will use for migrants. So actually what is the shift today in Europe is a shift from the idea that Europe is based on controlling the borders with the idea, the compromise with the idea, with the fact that you cannot easily control borders, because if you control borders, then you risk to kill people, and when you kill people, that is something sad that your liberal, modern consciousness of being a Westerner cannot tolerate. Because it's simple, I need to tell you. Control the borders between Greece and Turkey today means one thing. You send back the boats, or you sink the boats. So that means that you take the risk of killing people. Are you willing to take the risk? For years now, the Greek society and the Greek government was willing to take that risk. And the European Union was happy with the fact that the Greek government were taking the risk of killing people. Because the whole perception was based on the idea that the more difficult we make their lives in order to come, the less will come. The whole idea, which was not officially recognized, but it was fully operational within the European Union, was based on the fact, on the perception, on the belief that the more difficult we make their way to come, the less will come. From Spain to Greece. And this idea collapsed. Why it collapsed? Because the new generation is more philanthropic, more humanitarian? No. Because they understood, they compromised with the fact that this idea does not work. Please.
Yeah. Hello. I'm wondering. This is really a very hypothetical thing, but if the whole what to do in this situation is on a certain level based on what to do in order to keep our illusion of some kind of paradise that we have. Is it, for instance, like you mentioned now, if migrants are sent back, we cannot live with ourselves because we are not such good society of solidarity, and so this is damaging to us. On the other hand, the migrations that are, I don't know, from Europe to Australia, from this kind of migrations, it's generally, I would say, societally not seen as a threat. Hypothetically, I would think. But if someone comes from an area where it is expected that they come traumatized, this is something that we also don't want to see. No, trauma does not exist. No, we live in a nice society. So on one or the other level, we have to deal with the destruction of some illusions. So maybe it's about which illusion is easier for us to deal with when it's being destructed. I don't know.
I like it very much. I like very much your point. Thank you. I saw another hand. So which illusion is the most easy for us to get rid of?
Hi, I'm Flutra from Kosovo, and I would like to relate this issue with the current situation. Being part of a society that was merged from the war and being a former refugee, I know what it's like to leave your country to seek for protection and simply to search for a better life. So you were mentioning refugees and the migrants like they're not. They are actually rich people. You will say we're not poor, but we are seeing in the news that thousands of migrants are seeking for safety in the Europe, and there are like 11 million people. 50% of them are children, and they are working. I don't know if they are considered like immigrants or refugees, but they are working on the night shifts. They are older not older than 18 to work for $1, and no one is actually mentioning the human rights on this issue. And we had luck enough to get some help from Europeans, and also we had compassion towards us, and also a lot of help. But I don't see these things for the Syrian refugees, and it's considered now the biggest disaster in humanity nowadays. But we were like really optimistic on this issue, and we didn't even mention it. So we saw what actually is happening in the Hungary, and also when we see the Germany, like they had a warm welcome there. But on the other side, it was an issue with a journalist that will kick a refugee or an immigrant, whatever you call it. And when they say, if you want to stay there, you can offer you a job. I saw some documentaries that were crying, and they were trying to make suicide on these camps. And about the human rights, do they even know that this concept even exists? That is my question.
If they know that the concept of human rights, who?
The refugees or the immigrants.
Let me first clarify that I did not say that the migrants are not poor. I said that we need to challenge the widespread perception to the public opinions that the migrants are always the poorest. Why we need to challenge that? For two reasons. First, because migration costs, and second, because after this, the first flow, comes another flow which are really the poorest. That is what I said. I'm not saying that the migrants are rich. I'm sorry if I was misunderstood. So, do migrants know that there are human rights and so on? I think that a lot of people, they come to Europe because they believe that, after all, Europe is a political space of liberalism and democracy. They have it somewhere in their minds. And actually, that is the case. Europe is not, yes, has this particularity, if you want it. I mean, if you see what is happening now, the regimes of the Arab Gulf have their boundaries closed to refugees. They do not feel that they have to provide anything. So migrants and refugees today, actually, they tend to come because they have a vague idea that there they will not let me die, let's say. So that is how I feel. I do not know to what extent they have a very detailed or extensive idea about human rights and so on, but I think that everybody knows that in Europe, human life costs more than in their countries of origin. That is what I think is the case. Tell me.
Thank you. I came from Albania, and a lot of Albanians are in Greece, as you know. Some of them are good integrated and some of them not. But today, what I notice in media and in news is that some declaration from Slovenian officials and from Czech officials as well that say that we are gonna accept refugees, but with a condition to be Christians. Are we sure we are forgetting something in this whole issue that is culture and religion, yes, and thank you, and religious factor that we are forgetting that, because I can't explain with other factors and the reasons why European countries are so scared and this kind of fear to stop refugees and immigration with only conditions, even with fences and borders. And I think that we have to take a look on this kind of factors and reasons if you want to treat in a good way the issue of migration. And I don't know what do you think about that, but I think, in fact, we don't have a migration crisis and refugee crisis and economical crisis, but it's totally religious and cultural crisis. Is a challenge between different cultures, and Europe, I don't think, is still ready to accept. I mean, the mayor of European countries, because Germany learned is from history, and I know how clear I was, but
yeah, you are. Why Germany changed its line when it came to refugees a few weeks ago? Germany is not like everybody else. Germany has the history they have. Germany has the trauma of the 20th century that must be healed and must be wounded. And it is a society that fights in a passionate way to get rid of the trauma, not to forget the trauma, to heal the trauma. And this is something that not many European political communities have done. Second, Germany remembers still the failure of managing refugee flows from Yugoslavia in 1991. And they need to recover from that also. Third, Germany needs to show a better face, a more human face, a more solidarity face after the way it dealt with the Greek crisis, which stigmatized Germany to a certain extent. And fourth, Germany is a country that, after all, regards things in a very pragmatic, realist way. These four arguments are German arguments. If you try to see them in Italy, you will not find them. If you try to find them in Albania, you will not find them. In Greece, you will not find them. So, still, you see something which was completely unexpected. If you said a year ago that Germany, headed by a conservative government, will pay buses in order to move 30,000 people from the neighboring countries to Germany, that will be considered as a joke. You will never believe that. As in a few years from now, I'm telling you, and I really hope, that the people who are moving from Turkey to my country and paying the smugglers to put them in these small rubber boats to risk their lives to cross the Aegean, I hope that in 6 months from now, a year from now, this transfer will not be organized by illegal operations, but by the Greek state and the European Union. This is what changes the very concept of boundaries. Because for the last 20 years, the whole idea of Europe when it came to migration was, in the first place, integrate the people who are in and try to select good migrants based on religion, based on class, based on whatever, and close the borders. And what is challenged today is the very fact that you cannot close the borders. It doesn't work. Which in fact puts us in a new paradigm of what is a border. What is a border? Tell me.
Okay, my question will be short. While reading about this situation, I'm often wondering, why did the migrants choose the north of Europe as their final destination, since it's not the nearest safe place? Because there are many countries in Middle East, such as Qatar and other countries, which are all also let's say rich and lacking of labor, because I know that many Macedonians go to a temporary work in their countries. Why the migrants choose to travel all the way and
try to reach Sweden, whereas they have Qatar next to them.
Yes, yes.
I think the answer has to do with the fact, with something we raised before. First, that they know that in Europe human life has a meaning, whereas in Qatar, if they try to enter, they might shoot them, and that's it, and nobody will care. And the second is that they believe that in the long term, their life will be better there, will be better in Europe. And actually what I see hidden behind the German initiative is the recognition, after all, I mean, it's historical really to see it by the most romantic and organic nation of Europe, Germany, the recognition of the fact that in 20 years ago, the German football team will not only have 2 Turks, 1 Albanian, 1 Iranian, and 1 Lebanese, but it will be full like a colored football team like NBA today in the States. And I think this is what guides people to Europe, because they believe that this is this will be a lasting solution.
Yeah, and if I may add, it's actually kind of a myth that most of the migrants go to Europe, especially if you take Syria and the official data by UN. You can see that most of the migrants actually move within Syria, then to the neighboring countries, Lebanon, Turkey, even Egypt and even Libya. And then around maybe 10 to 15%, so around 400,000, actually go to Europe. So it's kind of a myth that some of the media in Europe are trying to sell. So yeah, that we had a...
Actually, I mentioned that at the beginning. Generally, we tend to believe that we are the center of the migration flows, whereas we are not. You know which is the country which has the biggest proportion of refugees and migrants in its territory today in the world? Iran. So it's not Switzerland, it's not Germany, it's not Sweden. Because it's next door to Afghanistan. Afghanistan collapsed, and you have 6 million of Afghans waiting in Iran. And the Afghans who come, they don't come from Afghanistan. The Afghans who come today in Europe, they come from Iran. Yes, sorry.
It's something. Okay. Yeah, I just want to add something, or want to talk about the wonderful arguments you gave us about Germany and why it's a welcome, why the welcome culture changed in Germany, because I'm from Germany, and I am very glad that you gave us that such arguments, but I have to be that it's not the reality I saw or I see every day in Germany. And I'm very also very glad that the European media, the world press, reported now very, very positive about Germany, but it's for me very wondering, very surprising, because it's, how I'd say, not the reality.
And what is the reality?
Because I come from the eastern part of Germany. I come from a small municipality, a small village, and there I see a lot of racism, of daily racism, and that's what we see now. A lot of very good examples of welcome culture I cannot see in my hometown where I came from. But I'm totally agree that there is like development now in Germany, that a lot of people changes their minds from a very old-fashioned and conservative thinking to a more liberal and to a more open-minded thinking, and that's helping. Yes, the culture of helping and solidarity now is very raising up in Germany, and I personally cannot, for me, I cannot find solutions why there was a change. Just one thing maybe I can mention, or I can add in that topic, that maybe 1 year or 2 years ago you can look in the German media landscape and you can find a lot of articles, bad articles about refugees and the migration issue and all, but now the whole German print landscape and media landscape is reporting very, very positive about the issue of migration and asylum seekers, and also the very conservative and populist papers, and that's maybe one, let's say, maybe one point in that whole, or one criteria in that whole issue why the welcome culture may be changed in Germany.
Is it working? Hello? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would like to explain why I think your argumentation is partly necessary and I see it also partly dangerous. So, as a first, I really appreciate to challenge the thinking of caring only about national borders and caring only about kind of your own peer group and all these things. I think this is really necessary in order to solve the crisis because it is not possible otherwise. But on the other hand, I consider your definition of problem really problematic in the sense that it underestimates objective as well as subjective problems that come with immigration. As an example for subjective problems are just all these things that come, all this rising right populism and extremism, the rising number of refugee camps burning in Germany and in other places. And I don't think that this is decreasing. I think it will increase with the number of the immigrants. And as well as objective problems, just as financial problems, just that we need to care for new camps, that we need to define the problems objectively. Like if we have a problem with language, we need to define it first in order then to use our morality to say we need to spend more money for language courses, for example, to solve this problem. So I think it is problematic to under-highlight these problems because people will think they are not taken serious.
Regarding your remark, of course I know that your society is not liberated from racism. And I know that actually you have a very consolidated perception of who is what. And everybody knows that. What I say and what I acknowledge today is the fact that a conservative government tries to give a different message, which was never the case in Europe with a conservative government. The message sent by your government today was the message that was never so strong by any other social democratic governments in Europe. That is my argument. Of course, I'm sure that in your hometown in East Germany, you suffer from racism, populism, xenophobia. And I'm not saying that these are phenomena that your society has forgotten. No. I'm just saying that the central argument today, pushed back, conceptualized by your government, is in a different direction. And that, I think, is a positive thing, despite the fact that, of course, I acknowledge everything of anything you say. When I say migration is not a problem, I'm not arguing that migration does not create problems. Of course, I agree with you. I'm not naive. I'm saying that migration is not a problem because it has no solution. It is a part of human normality, is a part of human history. Of course, human history creates problems to people, subjective and objective. What I say by saying that migration is not a problem, but it is a phenomenon, I'm just challenging the fact that people tend to conceptualize migration as a historical accident. Something went wrong and people migrate to our countries. No, it's not a historical accident. It is a part of historical normality. And that is what I'm saying. Of course, I fully acknowledge, and far from me to neglect or underestimate the very fact that phenomena can give birth to very serious social problems, such as xenophobia, such as extreme right, exclusion, poverty, and so on. But still, the message, and this is why I believe again that the German initiative is good, despite of the motivations and so on, is that whether you like it, whether not, you have to learn to live with migrants and refugees. Forget the idea that a historical accident happened in 1991, the borders opened, and people came to your country, and this is regarded as something which will come and go. No, they will come and they will stay, and that is how the system functions. I don't know, maybe if I helped with my remark.
Before we continue, I must say that we have 13 more minutes, and I already see 13. 13, 1, 3. And I already have 4 questions that are waiting. So we have one here, the girl behind, here, and at the back, I think. So I think that with all these 4 questions, we'll wrap this panel up. But if you want to discuss more, and I think most of you, or some of you, will have the opportunity to discuss this also in one of the working groups where this is one of the topics. So please, take the floor.
Okay, my name is Marko, I'm from Bosnia. And when you say that Iran is the biggest percentage of refugees or immigrants, how do you name it? So do you consider the fact that it's just a transit country and that mostly the people leave Iran and go to other countries, maybe neighbor countries or even Europe? So the impact is not the same in Europe, where they mainly stay for the lifetime period, compared to Iran, which is, as I've said, just a transit country.
Very nice question. Migration challenges the idea of being autochthonous. We said that before, we developed that. Everybody comes from somewhere. Eskimos, some Indians of the Amazon, some tribes are really autochthonous. We cannot seriously claim that we are autochthonous, unless I believe that my ancestors are 3,000 years ago in the center of Athens playing democracy. You believe that your ancestors were playing democracy up in Ypres and so on. But these are rubbish. So, we all come from somewhere. Transit. Migration also challenges the concept of transit. Let me tell you a nice story. Sad story, but nice. At the beginning of the 90s, as you all know, we have a very intense migration flow coming from Albania to Greece. Albanians knowing nothing, completely lost in space, hungry, dirty, just entering the Greek territory. So there were some guys, as of course everywhere in the world, waiting with their taxis in the road next to their borders. And the Albanians, they had some money with them, and they said, take me to Athens. And the taxi did not want to drive 650 kilometers from the Albanian border to Athens, but they will lead them to Arta. Arta is a town 100 kilometers from the borders. They will drop them there, take the money, say, this is Athens. Okay, the other guys will walk out, they will see Arta, say, Athens. In June, I was in Arta, in this town which is very close to the Greek-Albanian borders, and I saw a guy who lives there, who has his grandchildren there, and he came to Arta believing that he will go to Athens. And he learned 2 days after he was in Arta that he's not in Athens. He found a job. He got legalized in Arta, and now he's a part of the society of this town. What I say is that even what is a transit is very relative. Of course, Macedonia is a transit to Syrians. Don't be that sure. In the long scale, in the long term, some Syrians will stay in Macedonia. Greece is a transit. Of course, Greece was a transit. But we know that being a transit does not last forever, because people sometimes stop in the transits. So, being Iran a transit country is not that sure, because people are there for 10 years. The problem with Iran is not that it's a transit country. The problem with Iran is that it has isolated in an enclave at the southeast of its territory Afghan citizens, and it has actually closed them from any relation to the rest of the society. This is the problem with Iran. So transit society might become, after all, the last destination. So who is local? Who is autochthonous? What is transit? Migration makes it difficult to identify.
million people, and they have around 2 million refugees, almost half of their own population. While in the European Union, the population in total is around 500 million people, and the refugees here are less than 1%. Isn't the role of the media very present in when we talk about migration, refugees, and all the problems that they will create? Aren't some of those issues just created by the media? Thank you.
They are created also by the media. I think the example of Lebanon is also a very illustrative example of this Eurocentric perception of migration, as we tend to believe that everybody comes here. Lebanon is a country which is actually founded on refugees. Media, they have their role. But also I think that generally Europeans tend to regard Europe as the center of the world. So if you see a map of the world, you see Europe in the center, because you tend to believe that everybody wants to be there. So obviously, many people who are in Lebanon, they want to leave Lebanon and come to Cyprus. Actually, the first official of European government that mentioned that we will welcome Christian refugees is not the Slovenian Prime Minister, is a Cypriot minister who said that we will welcome Christian refugees. So some people will leave Lebanon, some will stay there. You see Palestinian refugees in Lebanon staying there over the last 40 years. So this is what I'm saying. Actually, it is all a conceptual mess when it comes to migration. The guy who stopped in Arta, he believed that he was in Athens, and now he has his grandparents there. I was a year ago in an island in Karpathos, southeast, even southeast of Crete, and I met a guy, an Albanian guy, very well integrated, his kids, very success story. And I asked him, how did you end up here? I mean, really at the other end of the world. And he said to me, I took the boat, and I wanted to stop somewhere that I will see there is no police. And he stopped at the end, lost, somewhere in the most deserted place. Said, no police here. He lived there 10 years, and that's it. And now he's a part of this society. So, there are these accidents in the good or in the bad sense that create sometimes human life when it comes to migrants.
Hello, I'm Marcello from Italy, and I had a couple of questions. One is regarding the argument you made about problem and phenomena. I tend to see it more not as a phenomena, but as a process, in the sense that seeing that is a phenomena that has always gone with humanity. It's true, but like it tends to hide responsibility that are like not always like from they're not like ideal. It's like some responsibility that are from Europe made the crisis happens, for example, in Libya. And that's why we have this phenomena going on. And it's not like, so also from the German government, I do agree with you that it's like, it's a big change from to have this attitude, but still there's not this passage of recognizing the share of responsibility that Germany and Europe itself has in creating the crisis and in exploiting through capitalism and whatever those countries from where the migrants come from. And yeah, one other thing, I'm really interested. I'm a social worker, so one thing that I see is that how do you say, this high-level phenomena or process that starts from like high political level and decision. Ultimately, it falls to a local level. So actually, the problem is that the burden of the taking care of the refugees and migrants ultimately comes to the local level and local communities. And in Italy, we have big struggle with this, like, because they are trying to do this kind of diffuse, spread up helping. So like the Pope said, like one family in each parish and whatever. But but this makes a lot of problem. Even though I think it could be a good way to develop the assistance, it takes a lot of problems connected to the perception that people have of migrants. So in this case, the role of civil society organization, and media, of course, it's really big to facing the problem that are coming from the phenomena.
What you just described is something which I could easily describe in a similar way when it comes to my national experience. So I see four key factors, key players here in the countries of destination. You have the central government, which gives the tune. So now we have a positive tune by Germany. But of course, the tune needs a lot of effort and a lot of work in order to go down and to melt in all the society, as you very well said before. Then you have local government, which follows another agenda, because it is responsible and it is accountable in a different way vis-a-vis its polity and its members. You have civil society, NGOs, social work, solidarity movements that they have a different agenda, which is partially independent and partially dependent to state funds. And then you have the media. So these are the four players here. I think it will work. I mean, I challenge you now. I think a good subject of work is to see how these four factors play when it comes to this refugee crisis today in different parts of the world. Where is the media? How the media plays? What is the message that actually the central government most of the time sends the message? Because in our times in Europe, the means of the central governments are not very, very extensive. They're very limited. So, but I think that is a very good point. I mean, try to locate conceptually and operationally where is the media, where is the central government, where is the central government, and where is the civil society. Now, I had another question. Yes. But I forgot to answer one question. Who was the previous? Sorry. Before yourself, you said something.
It was about
the process.
The process.
That is a theoretical point. Of course, no phenomenon is immobile. Of course, every phenomenon has an innate mobility. The idea of a process, a processual idea, perception of the idea of any social phenomenon is very welcome for my understanding of reality. I do not regard any phenomenon as something given. I regard phenomena as socially constructed also. And this brings us to a big theoretical discussion among empiricism, the fact of observation governing the reality, and constructivism. But I think now we tend to go to another discussion.
Yeah, since we are pushing the agenda half an hour more, we'll be finishing with this question, and you will have the opportunity to discuss with Professor Christopoulos. You will be here during.
I will be here. I will be leaving tomorrow in the afternoon.
So you have the night.
I need 1 more minute to finish with my lecture.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take the question at the back, and then you will finish. You'll be able to finish the lecture. Please. Can we get a microphone to the back?
You're a strong boy.
Okay. Bernhard from Germany. Actually, it's not a question, it's just a comment. You said one of the main reasons why Germany is taking so many refugees is because it feels stigmatized because of the crisis, how it acted with Greece. If I might add, I don't think so, that this is a reason whatsoever, because as well as Germany, as its supporters from the German-speaking countries, Benelux, Northern Europe, and also Eastern Europe, for example, the Baltic countries, don't feel themselves in a bad position. We feel like we are helping Greece, and we know that we have been criticized by Greece or Spain or Italy, whatever, but we don't feel it, and it's not perceived in the German society nor in the German media. Yeah, this is just something I wanted to add. Because of this, I would not see it as a reason why we take refugees.
I'm not saying that this is the reason that you take.
You said it's one of the 4 reasons.
Yeah, I gave 4 reasons, and I put that at the 4th level. And the very fact that you do not perceive it as a reason does not mean that your government does not perceive it also. That is one of the major issues that also I think was clear here. That the fact that the public opinion does not perceive something as a problem does not mean that the governments regard it in a different way. So I'm not saying it's the major, but I think it's something that also counted when it, at the last. So, let me finish by trying to, this is my last, no, I think I have one more slide here. So what is the relation of the 2 pictures? So what we see here is this, you know, this rubber boat of people crossing the Aegean Sea. You see 100 refugees on it. You know, you have the risk, you have illegal things, you have a threat. And what do you have here? Can you recognize what is in this picture? This is a picture coming from the Prohibition period in 1920 in the United States. So I'm sure you know that in 1920 the government of the United States decided to ban the use of alcohol, and the result was what? That people, yes, that the whole operation of fabrication of alcohols and drinks was undertaken by the mafia, and the decision of banning alcohol was one of the major reasons for the development of the mafia economy in the States in 1920. Something similar we have here. We have illegal operations by smugglers, and I think that until today, Europe, in the way it deals with the refugee crisis, could be compared with the US banning alcohol and providing the best it could to the mafia economy and to the economy of the smugglers, pushing people to illegal activities, engaging people to illegal operations, and so on. So what is I think the answer that Europe could give to that? That is a nice bar where you have legal alcohol, everything is okay, you consume whatever you want, and that is a very nice ship which was paid by the Greek government in order to take the people from the islands to Athens. I think this picture is better than the previous one. That is the way we need to work. That is the way we need to think. We need to forget our hypocrisy. We need to forget other constitutive myths, which creates the fact that we're Europeans, we're Germans, we're Greeks, Albanians, Macedonians, and maybe, inshallah, there is hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.